I'm loving the pop off.
What's good? Welcome back to the Pop Off Podcast, a conversation show about House of the Dragon, Season 2, Episode 3. I'm Ralph Compiano. I'm your host, and I'm joined, as always, by my Targaryens, Skyler Riesberg and Ehren Fox. This was an episode that we were eagerly anticipating. We talked last week about how 3 and 4 were kind of going to... We were talking about it in the group chat, really, about like where we're at with this season of TV so far. And Ehren, you've been very optimistic and encouraging us to keep our dicks hard for episode 3 and episode 4, right? Mainly episode 4, because that's the one that we know is called The Dance of the Dragons. Episode 3, naturally, is the episode right before, probably the biggest episode of this show so far. What did you guys think of this episode as a precursor to not only next week, but also as a standalone, as an episode of TV that you just spent an hour watching on a Sunday night?
I think that it made sense. I mean, if we're viewing it as it's about to go down next weekend and we got the Dragon on Dragons going, the war is finally going to start. This was kind of, Rhaenyra and to an extent, probably Alicent were the only two. They kind of made clear in this episode that we're trying to find a potential path to peace, avoid Dragon on Dragon conflict, which I really like that they're highlighting in the show. Like, they know how brutal it is. Like, it's basically like the atom bombs of our world. They're like, we know we have the power, but it's a loss for everybody. Why would we want to do that? So I think this episode felt pretty natural and inevitable, where we needed that conversation with Alicent and Rhaenyra so they can both walk away. Alicent saying the peace is already moving too much, and then Rhaenyra now accepting that Alicent won't do anything. And so I liked this episode. Obviously, I'm wanting the action and missing that, but I thought it was a good stepstone into what should be a really good episode, action-packed 4.
Yeah, I agree. I'd agree generally. I was looking for more. I think I felt kind of like Daemon did when he got to Harrenhal, where he thought it was going to go down. I got to be honest, I thought it was going to go down. And hand up, my bad. But I think between Alicent and Rhaenyra, I thought that was an interesting moment. I think it spoke, kind of their intention spoke to some of the things we were saying a couple weeks ago, where all the lords and lads and sirs and squires are just sitting on their ass wanting to kill somebody.
Yes,
like 90% of the time, and there's two people, one on each side. They're like, don't really want that, but let's see what we can get done. And at this point, it's obviously too far gone.
This is the first episode without Otto Hightower, which I thought was interesting. To your point about Alicent and Rhaenyra, let's start with that conversation, actually, because while the plan was being hatched between Rhaenyra and the White Worm, I said aloud to the boys that I was watching with, I was like, this show already this season has had some pretty stupid fucking plans. This might be the dumbest of them all. Trying to sneak Queen Rhaenyra into King's Landing, into the Red Keep, to have a dialogue with Alicent. So the validity of that conversation I had an issue with. But then once the dialogue started and they were actually talking to one another, I was like, this is necessary. This makes sense that this is happening, because it's a result of Alicent sending Rhaenyra a raven, which she mentions at the beginning of the episode. I refuse to read. I don't want to hear from her. She's responsible for the death of my son, all this kind of stuff. And then she kind of opens up to the idea, as conversations are being facilitated throughout the episode, of war is looming. It's coming closer and closer every second that we don't do some course of action. So she commits to the course of action about the conversation. This was the conversation that these two are hoping would amend all ties. It's supposed to be about Viserys's really not... I didn't like the word that she used when she was describing Viserys's dream. She called it a story that he once told, the Song of Ice and Fire, about Aegon the Conqueror. What did you guys think of that kind of like niche part of that conversation? Because that's what it was all leading up to, right? Like this misunderstanding that Alicent thinks that Viserys was talking about her son Aegon. That's the problem with naming all of your fucking kids in a family Aegon. Like, that's literally all it takes. Like, there's not many Ralphs in the world, but we haven't run any issues with that in my family, and there's 3 of us. But, like, what did you guys think of that part of that conversation about the Song of Ice and Fire specifically?
I think that, to this point, the 2 closest people would see it. I could see why Alicent might think it's more of a story. and Rhaenyra both, I guess. But I feel like when it comes to prophecy, that's one of those things that like gains legend. The story kind of grows and grows. And honestly, my biggest issue with it all was that it isn't like clearly recorded by anybody or recounted, where there's like a true, this is the story or the prophecy, if you will. Because how do we get to Game of Thrones and they all know about it? Like that continuity, I don't love. But I thought it was interesting that it came down to just a misunderstanding. And I think you have that moment between the two characters where they're like, dude, oh, this is all wrong. We've had this backwards. You've had this backwards, Alicent. Like, you can stop this. And it's just like, ooh, but I can't anymore.
Yeah, they're kind of just forced to stand on business at the end of the day. They got to, just like everybody in the realm, they got to be just about that action now. It is crazy. Just, it makes sense being a medieval show kind of based, but everybody really is just down to throw arms at any time. I mean, we had who was it? The Brackens and that other family. We saw this little like spute between these teenagers, and then they just, like, the next thing you know, there's just a huge bloody war where it literally looked like everybody died. Sure. So, yeah, I mean, there's no way everyone did, but I thought that was absolutely, it was randomly chaotic. But
chaotic and jarring too. Like, it was so unexpected that we're going to open on two families that I had no familiarity with from Thrones, the Brackens and the Blackwoods. Apparently they've had a distaste for each other over years and years and years. And even when Daemon invades Harrenhal and he claims it so easily, the gentleman that he was talking to, Lord Strong, he's like, well, why do the Blackwoods and the Brackens hate each other? And he's like, sin begets sin begets sin. One thing leads to another, and then it all just falls. So all of these people really are bloodthirsty. Like, Aegon's bloodthirsty, Aemon, Daemon, you name it. The only two people that aren't are Alicent and Rhaenyra. But to your point about the Brackens and the Blackwoods, just opening on them, that's such an interesting decision to me because, it's teenagers, and they're like the lords of their houses, and they're making the decisions here. And there's only like 6 dudes involved in the initial fight, and then we hard cut to like, it looked like 10,000 dead bodies, like with a sword in a guy's neck. I'm like, where the fuck did all these guys come from? Like, did this battle happen over time? Why couldn't we see this battle? Like, that's where I had an issue. I was like, show me that. Like, I don't like the telling versus the showing in the show sometimes, where it's like, and to your point, Aaron, too, like, how do you document this prophecy? Right? Like, there should be a maester somewhere that's inscripting all of this into an Old Testament kind of Bible. But I don't know. Like, there isn't a Samuel Tarly for the show that's like documenting everything, that's kind of serving as the biographer of these events. Like, we don't have a person like that in this show. So I pick issues with both of those things. Are there any other standout issues for the overall episode? Because I do have positives on it too, but I'm curious what negative things are looming for you guys.
I'd say one of the positives, kind of since you bring up that last point of like the hard cut to the chaos and death, that seemed to be like one of the main things that I got from this episode was like, this is what will happen. And I think that's why it was such a jarring cut. It's like, we are in this precursor where things can be stopped. Rhaenyra said something like, regardless who wins this war, the loss, it will be so great that it can't be considered a win. And Rhaenys says something to Rhaenyra in the same vein as the guy at Harrenhal did to Daemon, where it's what truly started this war. Was it the death of your son? Was it the death of her grandson? Was it Luke taking out Aemon's eye? Was it this? Was it that? And it's lost to time before too long. And so I think that was one of the things I liked the most about the episode. I think was just like, it's setting that foreshadowing of like, we're past the point of return, and shit's gonna be just like that jarring cutscene to death everywhere.
Yeah, no matter what happened to who, when it happened to who, or where it happened to who, it doesn't matter. It's all going to result in a bunch of innocents being fucking murdered, a bunch of family members being killed, people being slaughtered, and the start of a new world. Because, like you said, Berg, when you're dealing with dragons in this world, it's practically the atom bomb. Like, there is no coming back from this. You can't regenerate these lives. Like, they're going to take out everybody. Like, we saw it at the end of Game of Thrones, even just how powerful one big ass dragon like Drogon can be and what he can do to a city in a half hour. Like, it doesn't take that much time.
Yeah, literally.
Like, they fucking just obliterate entire cities with histories and families in the matter of instances. Any other positives or negatives that are coming up for you right now, Bert?
Well, the positive, I like that you guys shined and you specifically said what I thought was the key line of the episode, sin begets sin, was just like basically the theme. I mean, what we're getting at here, what we keep talking in circles about, that this is inevitable now. And using that family, I did like that. I like that they showed their conflict as a little microcosm of what's going on with the Targaryens. Something I guess if I had to pick something that I find an issue with, this is more personal, but the lore of Harrenhal, we're kind of spending a little more time there and getting a little more into that castle. And I feel like there's a lot of content on the history of Westeros, and we've touched so little on Harrenhal. They'll say things here and there in Game of Thrones and in House of Dragon, but I just feel like I'm always a little lost when we're talking about like the magicness and like because, you know, Daemon was having these supernatural dreams or visions, hallucinations, whatever they may be, due to being in this like cursed castle. But I just feel like I don't have enough of the backstory. And I know that they've mentioned it here and there, but only in like sentences, you know, with how much there is in House of Dragons and Game of Thrones, that's hard to retain all the time. I know I could go and look it up, but I guess I'm feeling a little lost sometimes with the Harrenhal narrative going on, because even when they pulled up, like we saw some guards on the top of the towers running around. Like, why wasn't there anybody to fight Daemon? Are they just pretty peaceful? I mean, I know it speaks to the disarray that the castle's in, but like there were people to fight there and they were just nowhere to be found. What, he ran into one guy, punched him in the face, and then walked in and said probably the most comedic line of the show, like, I claim this castle.
Yeah. I'm here to claim Harrenhal. He's like, yeah, you got it, man. Whatever you want. Well, I think that speaks to two things. It's like, we've heard about it being cursed. Those people were not reluctant to give it up at all. He said, I'm claiming Harrenhal, and they're like, so be it. It's yours. So I think that might even speak to like the nature of like, these people have been dealing with some pretty fucked up shit since moving into this castle. And they're like, yeah, man, you can take it. Like, you don't even know what you're getting yourself into. And then we see the hallucinations from him later in the episode. But I actually wanted to pick this out as a highlight. I think this show, I can't remember what other sequence it was. It might have been the blood and cheese sequence that reminded me of it. But there's almost a horror film element to Daemon arriving at Harrenhal, where it's very quiet. The camera movements are like really close up on his face, and it feels like at any moment, one of those guards that we just saw when they are looking up at the dragon could come around from the back and give a jump out scare. So I really liked that part of this episode, actually, where I'm like, this is different. I don't remember being scared a lot when watching Thrones, but there was a horror element to this that I found fascinating. But to your point about Harrenhal, this is the biggest castle in Westeros. It has its own lore, and you're right. I mean, we spent little to no time there at all in Thrones, and now it seems like it's going to be, Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, but a pretty pivotal location for the rest of the season, right? Like, that's where, I don't know, I feel like shit's going to go down. We thought shit was going to go down in this episode. Like you said, you know, coming into this episode, you had the same experience as Daemon going into Harrenhal, but I thought that was just, I would like to spend more time here. I like the atmosphere. I like the dampness. I love the darkness. I think it's great. What do you think of that location, Eric?
I'm excited to see more of Harrenhal too. You hear about it throughout Thrones, obviously, but in this episode, I really wanted to see the throne room. Like, there's just so many aspects of the castle that I want to see. I want to see like a full a high shot, so I can really get it to scale of how big it is, because it's been a while since I've read the books. I know it's a lot bigger than like anywhere else, but it's still in the Game of Thrones world kind of scaleless at this point.
But it's bigger than Winterfell, bigger than King's Landing, or bigger than the Red Keep?
I think it's the biggest castle, so it'd be like, yeah, bigger than the Red Keep, bigger than, you know, the Lannisport Castle, Highgarden, stuff like that.
Yeah,
like the true like strongholds. So I guess King's Landing is probably still considered a stronghold, though.
Yeah, but that's like New York City, and this is like the mecca of castles. This is like the Madison Square Garden inside of it, where it's like, this is where shit actually goes down. I wanted to talk about Daemon because I think this might be the first moment in the show when he's having dinner with Strong and he's calculating him and measuring him and telling him to call him Your Grace instead of My Prince. This was the first moment in the show that I asked myself, I'm like, am I really rooting for this guy's team? I'm curious if you guys have gone either way with who you're rooting for. I think we all started out the season completely firm and being Team Black, right? But it's kind of like the presidency. Like I'm watching the debate the other night. I'm like, I don't want to vote for this guy. I don't want to vote for that guy. I'm not really comfortable with either of them. This is the best we have to offer. I'm thinking the same thing to myself when I watch this. I'm like, it's either Daemon or Aegon. Like, I don't really like either of these motherfuckers. Where with Thrones, it's like, I was so invested in Jon and Arya and Sansa. And I was also really invested in Daenerys. And I loved these people. And I had one common enemy, which was Cersei, that I knew to hate. But I still even understood her sometimes and kind of loved her at parts. With this, I don't feel a love for really either side, if that makes sense. Like, are you guys firmly with Team Black still?
I'm still firmly with Team Black, but it's not that I love them more than Team Green. I hate certain people on Team Green enough, like Kristen Cole.
Yeah.
My hate burns strong.
Yes.
Deep, where Damon's
that little sneaky snake.
I think he wanted to fight. I think that's it. I think, he got in a fight with his girl and ran off. He's like, I'm going to go get you a castle. And then he's like, nobody's going to fight me. Are you kidding? Just like he's like any piece of shit husband who goes to the bar at 2 a.m. after a big fight, goes and beats some people up at the bar.
Also, just with how we're talking about, Kristen did that mission with Sir Eric the other episode, and in this episode you can see everybody was in. They made it pretty very clear cut and dry that everyone was kind of ticked off at the Lord Commander, the Hand of the King, Sir Kristen Cole, for doing this. They're like pretty rushed and stupid decision, even though it almost worked. I wonder how little they know about like how close he was there, but no. So doing that, I think this plan with Daemon, I understand it's completely different. He has a dragon, but what a wild plan to just send somebody, one man, one dragon, to a castle to take over. I mean, I'm sure they thought Harrenhal had to be a little more well-equipped and just more men there. And so I just think this easily could have been just a disastrous plan. Not that, I just think it's really overlooked as that was kind of dumb just to go up there. I get he's strong. I get all of this surrounding it, but one man against an entire potential army.
I mean, I don't think he really
very reckless.
I'm not sure he totally requested approval from Rhaenyra. She didn't sign off on this entirely. This was like if we think about it in like a psychological term, like he might have a little bit of a death wish going into Harrenhal completely by himself. Aaron, you pointed it out in the preview for this episode on the last episode. Like, it looks like he's just going alone. He did go alone. He went with him and Caraxes. That's it. Big ass dragon, long ass neck on that dragon. So crazy. Just looks really sweet. We also got a sweet POV dragon shot. We've never gotten that shot in the show where it's like the camera's on the dragon's back and you're looking down. I thought that was a fucking sweet shot. But like, there's a, in this thirst for violence with all of these people, we talked about it on the last episode. What are they doing when they're not fighting? They're bored as fuck. They don't have the internet. They don't have video games. All they have is wine and whores. That's really about it. And if you can't afford wine and whores, then you're just itching for some kind of bloodlust. Like, do people really want peace? And Daemon, I think, is, approaching that. And Rhaenyra probably wants him to go there and take Harrenhal over easily. But that's not what he wants. Like you said, Aaron, he's the drunk husband. He's pulling up to Harrenhal. He's looking for a fight. And there's nobody there responding to that fight, which pisses him off even more. And I hadn't thought about that. So I think that's a great issue that you raised, because I was just like, this fucking asshole. But I guess I kind of understand where he's coming from when I look at it in that light, where it's like, he just wants to punch somebody in the face and stab somebody in the throat.
They seem really scattered right now, Team Black. They were really driving home the point that they have no army. But, I mean, don't they have a good amount of houses declared? Did that really flip once they murdered the baby? They lost all their allies. They now have no army whatsoever, because you'd expect somebody to come with Daemon. Or like that would be the natural thought, let's get a little army gathered there or something. And it just sounds like they have no one now. I feel like that's also been a little unclear just because they can't go in and tell us every single house that is, who switched into what side. That would be a whole episode in itself. But yeah, it's just unclear right now who stands with Team Black at all.
It would be nice to have like a whiteboard and it's just like two
be.
columns. These people are on Team Black. These people are on Team Green. We know where the Starks are. Like they're with Team Black, but it's a bunch of old dudes apparently. Like they're not getting the best soldiers from that.
You know what? I can't
realm.
wait to see those guys out there. I feel like they might fuck shit up.
Or like, I mean, we're probably not going to get Dothraki in the show because Daenerys hasn't liberated them yet. But yeah, I am curious as to who's on what side because you're right. Like, but again, like Daemon, he didn't notify anybody that he was going there except for Rhaenyra. He's like, "Fuck it, I'm out of here. I'm going to Harrenhal. I'm just going to go take it, and I'm going to do it in your name, and you're going to have it, and you're going to thank me later." But also, all right. So, what did you guys think of? Like, I want to stay with him for a little bit. The hallucination that he has. He's at the tree with the fucking red face on it, tripping sack, Bran style. Shout out to Bran. And he sees little Rhaenyra, Millie Alcock's version of Rhaenyra, sewing the baby's head. Nasty image. Can't believe we had to see that. But it was nice to see Millie Alcock again. I really liked her.
It really was. I was really happy to get to see her face again. I agree.
But that reminded him, he's like, that's the version of Rhaenyra that he fell in love with. So on one end, that's really weird because she's like 15 and a half years old. But on the other end, it's like he's kind of having a realization. It's like his first acid trip. He's like, oh my God, everything comes full circle. That kind of thing. Like I just listened to Odessa and it turns out I really do love her. Maybe I'll go back and end this weird inner feud amidst this civil war. Do you think there's any turning around for Daemon? Like, can he become a good husband, for lack of a better term?
Do you think that was him saying or realizing he really does love Rhaenyra, like going back to the roots as you were getting at? Or was that him kind of coming to terms with, this is the girl I fell in love with. I don't love this older version of Rhaenyra. It is kind of creepy.
Old Kanye. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not this new Rhaenyra. So
She's
I can see it
now?
going either ways. It was kind of presented in a weird manner where, he's like, it's kind of presented like he likes young kind of thing. He's like, now that she's older, fuck that.
I took it a little bit than that. I feel like with the, Jaehaerys and she's sewing Jaehaerys' head, I think it was more like him coming to grips. It was like a little acid trip of what he'd done and kind of looking that in the face. And I think he was like, imagining like, what if it were, young Rhaenyra. So maybe he was seeing it through like a more remorseful lens and a little bit differing perspective on what he'd actually done and not necessarily like him trying to fight in a war, but actually like the ramifications of those actions.
Yes.
Because she says to him, she's like, you're just going to go out and come back and leave and then leave again. And I'm going to be here fixing everything. Like that's what young Rhaenyra says to him. And that's not what Rhaenyra is saying to him. That's his vision of Rhaenyra saying that to him and having that acid trip realization. I like the fact that the show has acid in it. Like it's not explicitly stated, but that tree is literally just like a foundation of LSD. I'm going to call it the Joshua tree from now on.
Old magic, baby.
Old magic. Very cool. A couple of other things that I wanted to talk about. The difference between the two councils. So we've spent a decent amount of time in council rooms so far this season. Do you guys want to do Team Black's council first and Rhaenyra's cabinet kind of getting a little bit giddy and a little bit frustrated with her and speaking their minds? Or do you want to do Kristen being late to his first council as Hand of the King? Which one do you want to go down first?
Start with the first one you said, Team Black.
Okay, so Team Black, Rhaenyra is, I think, I understood her last season as like, she's going to be a great leader. I'm going to believe in her. And now that she's not in public speaking mode, but like at the head of the table, her body language is a little bit fidgety. She's like shaking her hands and like kind of tweaking out a little bit in this position of power because she doesn't know what she wants to do, right? Everything is uncertain in her mind. She needs time to mull things over. She told them at one point in this episode, I've heard your arguments. Now let me meditate on it and think about it, and we'll take a course of action from there. Whereas in most council meetings, when a king or queen is present, they're making decisions on the fly. They're like a head coach in a fucking NBA game. They're like, okay, we got to adapt right now. Otherwise, we're going to get killed. And I think that's where the frustration is starting to boil up with her cabinet, right? I'm not sure who those dudes' names are, but all of them are getting a little bit big for their bridges and forgetting that this is, a mother of dragons. And they're like kind of barking orders at her essentially and almost committing treason to a certain degree. And she reminds them of that. So I was glad she stood up for herself. But what do you think of Rhaenyra as just a vocal leader? Like, would you elect this person president?
I was going to say, I think part of the reason that Rhaenyra commands so much respect, like in a blanket sense, is part of like who immediately gave her respect. So like Rhaenys choosing her side, Daemon choosing her side, Corlys choosing her side, I guess via Rhaenys. Those are some powerful players, and if they made decisions like that, like you might be more inclined to do so as well. But I feel like without Daemon at that table, it's kind of showcasing how other people might respect her more when her like sword is there versus when he's not. And I think Rhaenys kind of stepped up at one point to, give a little support at one point, but it's different without the looming threat that is Daemon just ever present.
It's like Joe Mazzulla being at a meeting with the Celtics and Brad Stevens being like, yeah, I hired this guy, and people having that brain trust in Brad Stevens. And then Brad Stevens goes to Detroit or something like that, and it's just Mazzulla there by himself. They're like, what the fuck is this guy saying? Why is he reciting Bible verses again and showing me UFC clips? This guy's a weirdo. What do you think, Riesberg?
I actually think that I thought she handled it well. I mean, I did see what you were saying. She was definitely a little seemed more unsure of herself with decisions. And I think I don't think we've seen too much of that. I mean, she has been idling whether to fight the war or to go the peaceful route, but she's going the peaceful route because that's her duty. Whereas here, I think she made a good decision by saying that, hey, I'm going to take some time. I'm going to think about this. And I thought Rhaenys kind of gave her a little nod. And she's also just such a badass character. She's kind of grown on me a lot. Like she's ready for anything. She's not intimidated by anything. We're talking team black, team green. I'm moving towards team Rhaenys.
I like
probably
Rhaenys
be
a lot
sitting
too.
on the throne. That was a pretty cold ass statement she delivered to those guys too after. And also, who the fuck are these guys? I get these are the people. She should supposedly have an army from these guys. I feel like they kind of just came out of nowhere, all these houses, and without knowing them that well, they all seem pretty fucking stupid.
Yeah,
they're just out there shouting things. Like she is a pretty awful council. I think Team Green's council is more leering, and they're way more strategic and tactical. But that's just because of the way they all communicate with each other. Here, everybody's just shouting things at Rhaenyra, and she's like, "All right, chill out. Let me figure this out. I'm going to think about it."
But I disagree to a certain extent about Team Green being like a stronger fist, because Alicent tells everybody to shut the fuck up because they're just barking at each other. Once Otto's out of the picture, she's like, where's the strategy? All we're doing, like, even the Lannister, like, looks over at, I think it's the Master of Coin or something. It's like, did you become the Master of War all of a sudden? It's like very childish behavior for grown adults who are leading a country, essentially. Like, it just seemed like they both seem so chaotic, and so they both seem like they have first term rulers. Not just first term, but like first few weeks. I think they put that into perspective in this episode. They're like, it's only been 3 weeks since the death of Viserys. Like, all of this shit is happening so fucking fast. And to your point about Team Black's council, we have no background with any of those dudes. I don't know their names. I don't know what houses they represent. Whereas when we would be in council meetings and Thrones, I would know everything about Varys. I knew his motivations, his history, the fact that he didn't have a penis. I knew everything about that dude. I knew everything about Tyrion. I knew everything about Tywin. And even like somebody like what was the little girl's name that gets crushed by the giant? What was her fucking name? I loved her. The Bolton.
Yes,
she was a Bolton, wasn't she?
Wait, no, she was
Ser Jorah's.
Yes,
she was Lyanna Mormont.
Yes,
yes.
Lyanna Mormont. Like, she would be like at the North Council and like standing up for Sansa in certain respects. And I knew everything about her, so I loved her and I listened to what she had to say. Where with these guys, it's like in one ear, out the other. Like you're just fucking barking dogs at Rhaenyra. I know nothing about you. I could give a fuck less about you. If she would have brought a dragon in to burn all those dudes alive, I would have felt no remorse whatsoever. Where if you do that with another council, like I'm going to feel like, oh no, there goes Tyrion, there goes Tywin, there goes Varys, there goes Littlefinger. But like these guys, it's like fuck them. Team Green.
I think it is a product of just kind of how much time we're getting with them on camera. We know a lot more about Green, so we know their motives, like you were speaking to. And then this, exactly what you were saying. Yeah, we just we're not as invested because who are these guys?
Well, it's a family. It's Aemond,
right?
It's Aegon, it's Kristen and Alicent, and we could talk about their relationship kind of being on rocky terms right now. Like there seemed like there was a little bit of tension there. Now that he's Hand of the King, he feel like he has the upper hand on her in these political conversations. And then we have a Lannister and two other dudes that I still don't know, a black dude and a white dude. But do you have more confidence in them? Like, I don't know. I feel like it's the same thing with Biden and Trump. I don't know where to go. I don't know who to trust. And they both seem like they're fucking lost.
No, I guess I want to say I do have more confidence in Green, but I mean, now that we're putting it out like this, what are we talking about? Yeah, these guys everybody's a hot-headed mess right now, just wanting to put dragon in skin and just obliterate the world. Everyone's thinking end of times right now.
I mean, maybe the most like embarrassing moment of this show so far was when Aegon takes his squire out for drinks. He's like doing some hazing, like midnight stuff. And they walk into the brothel and, he's flashing open curtains and he's watching a girl give head. And then we open on Aemond and he's cradled up next to his milfy mommy. I was going to get to that, but yeah, we see Aemond's dick. So, I mean, like that's what's going on.
I mean, the guy getting a blowjob, we don't even see his face. Yeah. We just see a large dick.
Yeah, it was pretty long. He had kind of like, it was, a good circular shape. It looked like it was circumcised too. So that's nice. It's nice to have Thrones back so we can see full frontal nudity again. No other show is willing to take that risk other than like Euphoria. And they do it in a very different way. Not a lot of Sydney Sweeney's in the show. But what did you guys think about the Aemond and Aegon situation where Aegon kind of big dicks Aemond and he's like, my squire is about to pork your lady right now, dude. Move to the side. And then Aemond is just like, all right, yeah, this fucking guy. I guess a whore is a whore. Do what you will with her. And then he just walks away.
I feel kind of bad for Aemond just because everybody knows he's the badass, and he just has to take it because his kind of bitch little older brother's, the king.
Yeah, these past two episodes, they have been kind of pouring in the sympathy for Aemond. I've been feeling that a lot more. We were definitely looking at him as this weapon. You point in a direction, just a direct parallel with Daemon. I mean, essentially, they were the same characters. They're giving Aemond a lot more humanity here and just giving us little small reasons to be a little sympathetic for him. I thought that scene was really funny, though.
I mean, we saw his dick, dude. Like, I don't feel too bad for him. Flaccid, hanging below the balls, like, it didn't look too bad. It's just the fact that, like, actors so one of my friends, like, she just watched, like, all of Game of Thrones in, like, 3 weeks. And she's like, why did they stop showing Daenerys' boobs after, like, season 4? I'm like, well, they put it in her contract. Like, she got too big. Like, is this show ever going to get big enough where, like, Aemond doesn't have to show dick? Because, like, we probably won't ever have another situation where we have to see it again. But if we do, like, will he? Like, I'm not sure. A couple of other threads that I wanted to talk about before we go. 2 people. So, Sir Gawain Hightower, Alicent's brother, and then also Rhaena, Valerian, technically, or Valerian, moving to Pentos. On Rhaenyra's command, she's moving to Pentos with the smaller dragons, and then a few dragon eggs, and then also Rhaenyra's children. So she's taking, I believe it was Tommen, I wanted to say. Oh no, Joffrey, little Joffrey, and then 2 other blonde babies. They didn't show the faces of them, but I assume those are her and Daemon's kids.
Viserys?
I think Viserys and Aegon III.
Yes.
Aegon III, so another fucking Aegon.
Just speak another fucking Aegon.
And this is not
his name.
And this is Viserys. Like, this is too far removed for it to be Daenerys' brother Viserys. So another Viserys in the Targaryen household. What do you guys think of that decision to move, Rhaena off to Pentos and kind of raise her own Targaryen family? Do you think she's capable of that? Do you think it was smart to get those little dragons out of there? And Also, like, how long does this plan take to hatch? Is this like a 15-year rebuild, like for the Pistons, or is this like, you know what, like this is just backup plan? Like, if we can't sign Paul George, then we'll get DeMar DeRozan instead.
I think it's more of like limiting risk and liability for Rhaenyra. You know, if she's got everybody and all the dragons in one central location, and you know Aegon and Aemond and whoever other dragons they come decide to just full swoop in with an army at the gates too, like they wouldn't be able to withstand that. So I feel like it's kind of just like a contingency plan. Should things go to shit, that your lineage is still there and your history is still there. The 3 dragon eggs, there's 4 in there, but 3 of them are from Syrax's brood, which is Rhaenyra's dragon. Those 3 become Dany's dragons.
So Drogon's in there.
Wild.
Drogon, Rhaegal,
Viserion. Jesus fucking Christ.
God, and then one of them hatches, and somehow they get to Elio,
something like
guy.
that.
So that suggests that they take about 150 years to hatch, right?
No, I think they were straight up dormant. I think it was just like the old magic, the black magic that Daenerys did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think they brought this up that you usually want a dragon egg to hatch. I mean, preferably quicker. It has a better chance of hatching and everything, rather than if you wait too long, they'll just turn to stone, which is what happened to these dragon eggs when we saw them at season 1 of Game of Thrones.
But one of them might turn out to be fucking Drogon, and he's like the goddamn Wembenyama of this universe, just an unstoppable force and an immovable object.
That reminds me, Ralph, I owe you a PowerPoint presentation breakdown of the dragons and their size. I like put something together one night, and I've got like a loose list ready for
Perfect.
With the dragons and their sizes?
Yeah, but basically, like, quick rundown. Drogon is like the size of Syrax, so Rhaenyra's dragon. So
okay.
that kind of puts into scale how fucking big Vhagar is in comparison. Because even Caraxes, I know he's like a long skinny fuck, but he's like a lot bigger than Drogon.
And then isn't there still another dragon that was touched on season 1 that's wild and around, and probably, obviously not as big as Vhagar, but probably the second biggest dragon? Is just unclaimed, flying around.
I think
is that still out there?
Might be. He's like equal size, maybe a little bit smaller than Vhagar, but faster, supposedly. But that's the cannibal. So
that's the cannibal one.
Everybody leaves him alone. I don't know if we'll see him. I hope we see him, because
I want to see him really badly.
I
want to see
dragons, and he eats like entire villages randomly.
Yes, that dragon sounds fucking awesome.
It feels like he needs to go. Like, they need to kill that dragon, because he's keeping the wrong... You don't want to do population control for dragons, do you? I mean, with knowing what we know, where it's going to go bad, and there's no dragons when we enter the Game of Thrones verse, like, in hindsight, maybe they should have done something about that little cannibal.
But dude, I gotta see this dragon, dude. Like,
I do want to see it.
It's the Jerry West quote. He's like, a lot of people are called dogs in the NBA. Well, I was a wolf. I ate dogs. And it's like, oh, that's the hardest shit I've ever heard. Show me the dragon that's Jerry West that's just going out. So yeah, Aaron, you do owe us a PowerPoint of, I think we were going to do NBA big men or just NBA players, because I guess there's probably an Earl Boykins or a Spud Webb out there amongst these dragons, and which one is Shaq and which one is prime Dwight Howard and so forth.
I got you.
Yeah, so I'm really behind this move as well. And I think using Rhaena as the kind of girl to put in charge of this was a incredibly smart move. Whether she knows it or not, we're very aware that Rhaena has this chip on her shoulder, something to prove. She apparently never got a dragon. I really didn't know that until this episode. But yeah, I think it's perfect to put somebody with their back against the wall in that situation. So she'll come out. I think she'll be a player.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a lonely dragon out there too that the White Worm pointed out. Like,
yeah, why can't she just take that dragon?
That was her mom's dragon, correct? The one that burned her alive.
Her mom's dragon was Vhagar, which she bonded with but never like claimed, and that's why Aemond got him.
Oh shit! Really? Okay, so the biggest, baddest motherfucker literally switched teams. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's Heat, LeBron. Another person we need to talk about before we get to Alicent's brother. There's a long lost Targaryen. He's a bastard brother that is hanging out amongst the common people. He's really popular. Cool tracking shot of him walking into the bar, and everybody loves this guy. Like, he's just the fucking man. So he's half Targaryen. He is Viserys and Daemon's bastard brother's son. So that's technically, Daemon would be his uncle, half uncle, I guess you could say. How crucial of a role could he possibly play as a bastard? Because even Jon, 200 years later, like, people are still like, oh, he's a bastard. Like, we're not going to give him any credibility whatsoever. And that's probably a little bit more liberal times than this, right? Whereas, like, I'm not sure people are going to respond to being a bastard, but if Aegon or somebody like that finds out about him, then their credibility gets a little bit dwindled and they just torch him. But, like, why did they show us him? Like, why does he matter in this story?
Well, he's a Targaryen.
With, like,
And
gray hair,
We're all
though.
like down with that. We're all believing that he is a Targaryen. He's not just out just talking shit at a bar.
I'm just saying, I don't want to spoil anything, but
Okay.
But he's a Targaryen. That's all you're going to say?
What do Targaryens do?
Okay.
He really doesn't have that look, though. He really doesn't. I thought when they were cracking jokes at him, that was, I mean, I'm with you, Ralph. Like, why? I'm asking myself the same question. Why are they showing this to us? Because I can't see any possible road path you go down where he comes out as like a player in this series at all. It just seems like this would all culminate in him getting built up and immediately dying because he's just fodder.
Aaron did just say, what do Targaryens do? And we did just talk about a lonely dragon. So maybe that comes into play. Who knows? I'm just speculating. You know, maybe I'm shamming or woging, but I'm not sure. All right, let's talk about before we spoil anything, actually. What's his fucking name? I already forgot it. It's
Sir
Alicent's
Gawain?
brother. Sir Gawain.
Sir Gawain.
It's a shitty name.
Yeah, it's a loser name.
Yeah, but I'd be pretty pissed off too if one, my dad named me Gawain, and then two, I go to visit my dad and it turns out he's no longer the hand of the king. Like, he has the right to be kind of pissed off and kind of telling Kristen off at one point. That was one of my favorite moments of the episode, where you see Kristen, you see Gawain, and Gawain's telling him, he's like, dude, we're about to go to an inn and get drunk and fuck. And there's nothing you can do to stop us because I know what's going on between you and my sister. I know you did to my dad. I get it. I see through you. And then turns out their cover's blown. And I believe it's Bela and her dragon. They chase these motherfuckers down into the trees. I did not know that was a strategy against dragons. Like, we still are learning about dragons despite spending, 9.5 seasons with these characters, about how to handle what are the real world adjustments for them. We've seen the scorpion before and we've seen it take out a dragon, but I don't know like what somebody on a horse is supposed to do against something like this. Turns out if you just go into a very forested area, then you're good. You just seek cover and you stand still. So that's actually pretty helpful for me to understand, because I did not know that. I was like, oh shit, they can camouflage themselves. This is a totally different level of like, so I really liked that because that layer just was not uncovered for me before.
As long as the dragon isn't too big, that works.
Interesting. So the size of that dragon,
light it all up,
Yeah.
And I was hoping for a bit of flames there.
I was wondering. So it kind of seems up to the writer. Like, there was definitely a moment there where we were probably thinking, is she just going to light this up?
I was hoping she would because it was Kristen.
I was hoping she would too.
It wouldn't be a good look like for their, politicking or deforestation. Like, climate change is a very real thing. And she would be committing, a lot of heinous crimes against that forest.
Yeah, that forest would probably just be a symbol of Targaryen terrorism. But a big moment for Sir Criston Cole right there. He was the guy who told everyone we're way too open right now. Start going. A little bit before they knew the dragon was there, and he gained Sir Gawain's respect at the end. He says, I owe you my life. And so we saw a little flip switch right there.
Yeah, and Kristen's like, no fucking ends. Okay, I think that's really all I have for this episode, so now we can go into ratings for it.
I got one thing here real quick, just because this has kind of intrigued me during that. We know some of these scenes there's a lot of prophesizing in Game of Thrones in that world. And so when Daemon was going through the visions, hallucinations, they said, you will die here. We don't know who that girl is, but she looks like she's important. in Harrenhal. She appeared, said, "You'll die there." Are you guys taking that at face value? Like, I kind of want to know what you guys took away from that. Like, if there was anything, or if we're still trying to figure out what that means. But I mean, did we just get the place of Daemon's death?
I mean, anytime we have like a Helena or somebody that like proclaims visions and predicts things, I always take it at face value. I'm like, I believe you. I'm on your side. Don't fuck with me. Don't tell me what's gonna happen to me. I thought of her when I saw her. I've been thinking about Melisandre a lot after watching season 7 and season 8. She gives me that vibe, like I'm not sure exactly what her role was, but like serving the god of light or god of fire, whatever the fuck it was. She strikes me as that kind of vibe, where it's like emo goth babe, kind of hot, kind of appealing, but also like, I don't know, if I fuck her, she might take a necklace off and turn into a 650-year-old woman.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, she told him straight up, like, can you imagine hearing that? What if a chick just came up to you at Black Sheep and she was just like, you're going to die here? I'd be like, I'm getting the fuck out. And Daemon's so goddamn stubborn, he's probably going to kick it at Harrenhal for another few months. He's not thinking of it that way. But if I'm at Black Sheep and, you know, an emo babe comes up to me, she's like about to pour me a tequila shot. She's like, you're going to die here. I'm not taking the shot. I'm walking out and I'm going to 85 with my boys. Or I'm going back to
What
haiku.
about the context though? Say you're like 6 or 7 shots deep.
Ooh.
You know, you've been making
fresh out of a hallucination.
Comments. You're making comments like, "Oh man, I'm fucked. I'm gonna die tonight." Like,
do I say that
like
often
we were
when I get
talking
drunk?
about, like,
is that what you
I
hear
can't
from
recall
me?
you ever having said that, but I don't know. It seems like it's legit.
and just knowing Damon's mental state, that he's probably closer to how you're talking him up, Ehren. He's kind of he came there looking for blood. Obviously, the man isn't too keen on his life. He's ready for a good fight, ready for a good time. So he's probably hearing that death thing, like, you know, it is what it is. If I'm going to go out, I'm going to go out in fire.
Dude, he also might just like need to get a nut off though. Like the more that I think about it, like him and Rhaenyra don't seem like the kind of couple that have had, you know, central relations recently. It seems like it's been like since Viserys died, they probably haven't gotten a good bone session. That might just be what he needs because like he's so pent up and just like full of testosterone for like a 42-year-old dude. He could be like 25 years old for all I know and just look really old because, you know, that's just how people aged back then. They didn't have moisturizer for their face. But like, I think this guy just needs to get a nut off because he's just so aggressive. He's so aggro all the time.
And he's just staying in that mindset. Just he's not going to a brothel. We've seen him, to his credit, I guess, stay faithful to Rhaenyra, but yeah, he's not having any touch of the woman right now. Definitely playing into some craziness going on with him. It could be why he's hallucinating.
It could be why he's hallucinating. He's just got semen pent up. All right, let's do ratings. Again, you know, every time we talk about this show, I end up liking the episode a little bit more. I came out of this episode and I was like, ugh, fuck. Another filler, another stepping stone. I know it's leading up to something great. The preview for next week looks awesome. Looks like there's going to be some war shed.
I actually watched it this time.
Yeah, it looks fucking awesome. So I will go 7.4 out of 10. I think before we had this conversation, I was like really frustrated because one, like, you know, last week I didn't have anything to compare this to. The only things I was comparing it to were The Boys and The Acolyte. And I try not to cross compare shows. I tried to, on my rankings 1 to 10, be like, what could this be? Like, what's the best that it could be? That's the 10. The 10 isn't like The Godfather or Goodfellas, because that's not what the show is supposed to be. It's supposed to be House of the Dragon or Game of Thrones. So I'm really holding it to like season 6 Game of Thrones standard. That's the 10 for me. Whereas now, but like, I watched, you know, 2 episodes of The Bear on Friday night, and I was like, fuck, this show is just so much better than everything else on TV right now. So I kind of went into this episode with like that in the back of my mind. But then after this conversation, I'm like, yeah, 7.4 sounds fair.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting because I feel like I'm kind of coming away here like I probably like this episode the best. I'm just okay with this stepstone, I guess. Especially, I say this with the preclude that episode 4 really needs to, you know, bring it home.
Yes,
really needs to be an action-packed good episode. But right now I'm going probably 7.2. I think I gave last week's a 7. I thought this was pretty good. Could be 7-2, 7-3, 7-4. Sure, that area is very fine. But I like that we got to focus on. I felt like we got more dialogue. We actually heard Helena, the sister, talk.
Yep.
You know, she wasn't talking too much last time. She was obviously very sad. We got Bela and Rhaena talking. Two characters last week. We were asking, what are they doing with these characters?
Look at you,
really
dude.
Just sideline shows.
Female empowerment for Berg this episode.
Who else did we get? I mean, I just felt like we got some more time with smaller characters, and it looks like they're going to start bringing them in a little more.
Yeah.
So I liked that aspect and thought that was really cool. And then there was just a lot of good foreshadowing. I think what really wrapped this episode together for me was realizing that they were going to have the talk of the prophecy at the end. And that just drove it home for me of like, that was so important. Once I wasn't really thinking about it. It didn't feel like something that was practical that could happen in this world, but they made it happen. It made sense. And now we know where these two teams stand. Alicent definitely understands, you know, hey, maybe I actually was in the wrong here, but she's going to stand down, or not stand down. She's going to stand on business. And Rhaenyra is finally realizing, all right, there's no other choice. I tried. So I just really like the culmination of where we ended here.
Yeah, I like your point about the smaller characters getting more speaking opportunities too. Except I think we had like 4 shots of Jace, Daenerys or Rhaenyra's oldest son. I don't think he said
just
a word.
Looking pissed.
We just saw shots of him just like putting his hand on his sword, and that was really about it. Like, oh, he just carried that sword around all the time. That must be a heavy.
Now
burden.
He does.
All right, Aaron, what do you think? 1 to 10.
I give it like a 7-1. Half because I was expecting more, and that's my own fault. But it was a solid episode. That being said, I think, you know, it was well done. I was just looking for more out of episode 3. I wish we had a 10-episode season, because in like Game of Thrones, they have like this semi-standard formula of like when things happen.
Yep.
Really enjoy that.
You might have like random climactic events, but for the most part, like 2, 3, 4, pretty chill. 5 is good. 6, 7, chill. 8, 9 are awesome. 10 is kind of wrap it up. But
yep.
I feel like with an 8-episode season and all the time jumps, there's no like rhythm to when and how things come. But all in all, I thought it was a good episode. Berg, I agree with everything you said. That was really well said. I think it'll be a fun episode 4, though.
I think it's really funny how they do these time jumps all the time, and thank God they're not giving us like years and months and days. I don't need all that. That's just too much. But they use haircuts a lot. Like Sir Kristen got a haircut this episode. Looks so much worse. But you can just tell like, okay, we obviously not too much time has passed. Way less than I thought, because they explicitly said it's only been like 3 weeks since Viserys' death. You're like, whoa, there's a lot going on in those 3 weeks. But just seeing the different haircuts when they do time jumps always cracks me up.
Yep. Yeah.
People go from better to worse, glow up, glow down.
I love your point about episodic pacing too, Aaron, because you're right. Like I knew 9 and 10, it's like, here we fucking go. And then like they might sprinkle in the Red Wedding. I think that's like season 4, episode 6 or something like that. So it's like every now and then we get the shocker.
I think
it was a 9. I'd have to go back and look, but like this one, like the banger is supposed to come episode 4. And that's the halfway point of the season, right? It's an 8-episode season. So it's like, shit, what are 5, 6, 7, and 8 going to be if we're going to, you know, reap so many benefits on that, you know, hour and 15-minute battle that we're going to have next week? And fingers crossed that it is. But yeah, this has been really fun. Again, I'm feeling a lot better about the episode after talking about it with you guys. So thank you for doing this. Make sure to share this with somebody that's listening to any House of the Dragons content. Ours is the fucking best. We're out here dropping hella dick jokes, and make sure to stay with the show. I know it's exercising our patience, but next week it's going to be so worth it. And once you commit to something, fucking commit. You know, go the Daemon route. Go all the way down with it. Go down with the ship. Even if it ends up sucking 5, 6, 7, and 8, at least we can say we tried. All right. But I still feel pretty good about the show as a whole. And I know these guys do too. So thank you for listening. We love you. And we will see you soon. Peace out. I'm loving the pop off.